Perhaps every little girl dreams of becoming a princess. Beautiful, rich, and famous, living happily ever after like in a fairy tale. KRISTIN Johnson was no exception. She had a happy childhood, big ambitions in her youth and adulthood. She wanted to become famous, and she did. But not because of her outstanding talents, but because of the extraordinary cruelty of her killer. KRISTIN Johnson was born in 1981 in Santa Clara, California. She lived with her parents, Mother Teresa and Father Kirk Johnson. When she was still an infant, KRISTIN and her parents moved from California to the small town of Saugatuck in Michigan. It was a quiet, peaceful town with a population of less than 1,000 people. Known for its calm harbor, the town was cozy and beautiful. It seemed like the safest place to build a happy future. The crime rate was extremely low. Locals didn't lock their doors, not fearing any wrongdoers. The community was built on the fact that everyone knew each other. KRISTIN had an older brother, Derek, just a few years older. Their family seemed loving and happy. However, the family idyll was disrupted when the Johnsons decided to separate. They remained on good terms for the sake of the children. KRISTIN and her brother lived alternately with their father and mother, as required by the custody arrangement. Because of this, KRISTIN quickly became accustomed to household chores. She began helping her mother from the age of 12, including managing the family budget. KRISTIN tried to find any work to become independent and not ask her parents for money. Later, her older brother joined the military and decided to pursue a career in the armed forces. At the same time, the young woman was attending high school. As she became independent, KRISTIN took full control of her life. This was helped by her intelligence as well as her natural beauty. She was also very cheerful, lively, and an interesting conversationalist. KRISTIN looked great, partly due to her active and healthy lifestyle. Her friends admired her beauty and advised her to conquer Hollywood. Above all, she loved sailing, surfing, and anything related to water. She enjoyed these sports when she visited her grandmother in California. However, when she returned to Michigan, KRISTIN always missed her favorite hobbies, and it took some time for her to adjust. There she became interested in theater, being a member of a small acting club. During the winter, the girl worked as a waitress at a local cafe. She became a real gem for the cafe owner, as she was very sweet, polite, and sociable, attracting more customers. At that time, the girl often thought about leaving their tiny town of Saugatuck. The calm provincial atmosphere was not for her. KRISTIN felt she deserved more and wanted a different life than just serving food in a cafe. She believed there were no big prospects for her in that town. In 1999, she graduated from high school. Finally, she had enough freedom to start building her life and her road to success. After reflecting on her situation, the girl decided to go in search of herself. She traveled to different cities, worked there, and tried various fields of activity. Eventually, she decided to settle in California in 2000, a place she had always loved. The climate was perfect, and there were far more opportunities to realize her potential. First, she moved in with her grandmother in the small resort town of Santa Maria with a population of 100,000. But despite the proximity to all her favorite activities, KRISTIN first focused on important matters. The first thing she did was look for a job to support herself. This was very important to her. She got a job as a system administrator in an energy company in the city. Then she focused on her education. She decided to enroll in the University of California. The educational institution was quite far, a 40-minute drive from her grandmother's house. She enrolled there and bought a car with money she had earned earlier. But even driving that far was a problem. It took up a lot of her time, so KRISTIN started looking for work closer to home. This is when she first touched upon her dream, Hollywood. She managed to get a part-time job with a film crew planning to shoot a movie. Her experience in theater helped her blend into the new work environment. As a result, she was hired as an assistant on the set of a thriller. Here she met people who lived and breathed Hollywood. It was a real starry moment for the girl from the provinces. She interacted with world-famous actors and directors and was incredibly happy. KRISTIN couldn't believe she was talking to celebrities. She was literally consumed by the world of cinema. This job inspired her so much that young KRISTIN wanted to be closer to this field. She enrolled in professional makeup courses where she was taught by Hollywood makeup artists. After mastering these skills, she considered becoming a makeup artist on a film set. To pursue this, she planned to go to the City of Dreams, Los Angeles. Even though it was a risky trip, her curiosity was stronger than the fear of the unknown. KRISTIN felt drawn to Hollywood. Eventually, she moved to Los Angeles, where several famous movie studios were located. This was a period full of temptations for the young beauty, but she demonstrated the best manners that a young girl could. She didn't lead a wild lifestyle, despite the popular trends in the community she had joined. She avoided parties and social gatherings, remaining rather modest. She had a boyfriend, Todd, whom she had met a couple of years ago, and they continued to communicate despite the distance. Later, he moved in with her, and they decided to rent an apartment in Los Angeles together, starting in 2002. The young couple still didn't have financial stability, so this arrangement was beneficial for both of them. It was a difficult adventure, but the girl didn't lose hope and started looking for a full-time job. However, things were tough. KRISTIN could only find various part-time jobs, and there was no serious work available. Most of their budget was earned by her boyfriend. Meanwhile, the relationship between KRISTIN and Todd started to deteriorate. Later, KRISTIN complained to her mother that verbal arguments with Todd increasingly ended with him resorting to physical violence. She had fallen into a toxic relationship, which was financially draining. Her mother began looking for a new place for KRISTIN to move into. KRISTIN escaped from her boyfriend, settling into a small apartment. She continued studying remotely. During this time, her father provided her with good financial support. He hoped that his daughter would finally find her place and purpose in life, so he wanted to help her. By November 2002, KRISTIN finally found a job at a mobile phone company, but this job was far from her ideals. Neither the field nor the income matched her expectations. Furthermore, she still couldn't find a suitable place to live close to her work. Her mother found a cozy house in the nearby town of Santa Monica, which she would share with two other girls. However, it was near the beach and in a lively residential area. It was the perfect place to get back on her feet. So KRISTIN moved there. During this period, the girl transferred to Santa Monica University. KRISTIN's dreams of Hollywood had not come true. She had not been able to start building her career, her relationship had fallen apart, and she had literally started her life from scratch. But the girl did not despair and continued to pursue her dream. On February 15, 2003, she was planning to go to a party. Before that, the young beauty went to the shopping center. She talked a lot with her mother on the phone, discussing future plans. This was the last call KRISTIN made to her loved ones. The next day, Sunday, February 16, 2003, the mother was waiting for a call from her daughter to hear about her day, but the girl did not make contact. The woman tried to call her, but the phone was unavailable. At first, this didn't raise much concern, as her daughter might have been resting or at work and missed the call. However, the next day, KRISTIN still didn't get in touch. Around 9 a.m., the woman called her daughter's workplace. She was always on the phone and would answer. But this time, the mother reached the voicemail. So the mother called her daughter's manager, who informed her that KRISTIN had not shown up for work. He also emphasized that KRISTIN had been a very reliable employee, with no tardiness or absences in the past 3 months, so her absence was surprising. However, they were also unable to reach her. According to the manager, the last time anyone saw her was on February 14th. One of her co-workers mentioned that KRISTIN was going to some party. The missing woman's mother checked her daughter's social media page, but found no useful information about a party. KRISTIN hadn't posted any pictures from it, although she had been active on social media before, documenting every step of her life. The mother also checked her daughter's bank account transactions, but since the moment she stopped making contact, no transactions had taken place. She called every hospital, but KRISTIN wasn't registered anywhere. On February 17th, the mother decided to call the Santa Monica Police Department and reported her 21-year-old daughter as missing. Investigators checked if a girl resembling her had been involved in any car accidents in the days prior, but found nothing. The young woman's neighbors also hadn't heard anything about her after her disappearance. The police reached out to her ex-boyfriend Todd, with whom she had had a turbulent and sometimes violent relationship. They considered the possibility that he had found his runaway girlfriend and done something to her, but he denied having seen her. Neighbors gave some superficial information, saying they had seen KRISTIN on Saturday, February 15th, and that she was heading to a party, but they didn't know who she was going with or where it was. KRISTIN's co-workers had previously mentioned this to her mother. This was the first lead in the case, and investigators began to check the information. Later, a new detective took over the case. As soon as he opened the collected files, the photo of the missing girl shocked him. The crime victim bore a striking resemblance to another missing girl who had been found dead in 1995. That girl, a budding model, had been invited to a photo shoot for a glossy magazine by a photographer, but the shoot never took place. The victim's name was Linda Sobek, and her killer was the photographer Charles Redban. He had tricked the beautiful blonde into going out of town, where he raped and killed her. However, the detective also knew that Linda's killer was already in prison at that time, and physically couldn't be involved in this case. But it could have been a copycat inspired by Charles. Following his method, the detectives needed to get any information related to the girl, so her car, a white Mazda Miata, was put on the wanted list. At the same time, during conversations with the mother, investigators learned more details about her daughter's ex-boyfriend Todd and found out about her new boyfriend named Lucas. However, the mother knew very little about Lucas, not even his last name, which made the search more difficult. More than 48 hours had passed, and this was a critical period for missing persons cases. The police seriously believed that KRISTIN might already be dead. They began to study the billing data from her mobile phone. It was discovered that the last outgoing call from her phone was made at 5:34 p.m. on February 15th. She had called directory assistance at 411, which could mean she was in trouble or trying to clarify an address or phone number. The conversation lasted about 3 minutes, which suggested it might have been an important exchange for the investigation. However, the exact content of the call could not be determined, as these calls were not recorded. After the call, her phone died. The last known location of the phone was pinged near Ventura Boulevard. Following this, the police reached out to the media to attract attention to the investigation. Headlines quickly appeared, linking KRISTIN's disappearance with similarities to the murder of Linda. Investigators searched KRISTIN's apartment for possible clues. They found a receipt from a lingerie store dated February 15th, the same day KRISTIN went missing. The police also learned that KRISTIN had continued to communicate with her ex-boyfriend, despite his aggressive behavior. She sometimes visited him, with the last visit occurring on February 7th. But the first real breakthrough came when the detectives examined the information from KRISTIN's email. On February 13th, KRISTIN had sent a message to the coordinator of a party. She expressed excitement about the event and mentioned she planned to buy a ticket. The coordinator replied that all tickets were sold out, but added her to a special waiting list. This was a common tactic used by event organizers with celebrities, where they deceive visitors by offering VIP tickets at inflated prices. The police managed to locate KRISTIN's new boyfriend, Lucas, and spoke with him. He stated that he last saw KRISTIN on February 14th, the day before her disappearance. They spent the evening watching a movie together and then parted ways. Lucas passed a polygraph test, had an alibi, and raised no suspicions with the investigators. Afterward, the detective spoke with her ex-boyfriend, Todd, but he also had an alibi. He had been out of town, and several people confirmed this. Of all the theories, the police were most interested in the party KRISTIN was headed to and didn't return from. They believed this held the key to solving the mystery of her disappearance. The investigators contacted the event organizers and were shocked to learn that KRISTIN had not purchased a ticket and never showed up at the party. But where could she have gone? To reconstruct the timeline of that fateful evening, the police checked the transactions made with KRISTIN's bank card. This led them to find and investigate all the stores she had visited that day. They searched for surveillance footage from these stores that might have captured any unusual events or clues. This investigation took a long time. While the police were going through all the information, an alarming phone call came into the station. A woman named Susan Murphy reported a suspicious person. She shared a brief story about meeting a man named Victor Thomas in a store. He introduced himself as a representative of a film company casting for the new James Bond movie. She said he had pressured her, inviting her to audition for the role of Bond's girl, praising her beauty. He tried to convince her to participate in the casting, but she found him suspicious and managed to decline at the last moment. As a precaution, her husband, a former police officer, went to meet Victor in person. He spoke with Victor and tried to gather information about his intentions. However, he escaped without providing any valuable information. But Susan checked everything she knew about him, and it turned out he was lying. Victor Thomas had no connection to the film industry. Such a person did not even exist. The man likely invented this information, just like the killer of Linda Sobek, and probably used it to try to meet a beautiful girl, though his exact intentions remained unclear. Although Susan's story ended well, Victor was still at large and could continue with his schemes. Therefore, this information had to be urgently verified, and Victor found he might have had malicious intentions. Investigators checked all the stores where KRISTIN had shopped on the day she disappeared and reviewed footage from the cameras, but found nothing interesting. Then they decided to visit the shops and talk to the staff. During their conversation with the salespeople, the police gave a description of Victor, who had been approaching attractive girls. In one of the stores, a salesperson said she had seen a man who resembled him, but the woman couldn't provide any further helpful clues. A sketch artist was called to the scene to create a composite portrait of the suspect. The search for KRISTIN was gaining momentum. The police sent dogs and volunteers to the area where she had last made contact and called the information service. Meanwhile, patrols and volunteers were searching for her car and for KRISTIN herself. The police received many reports about a similar car being spotted somewhere, but all of these turned out to be false. Finally, on February 24th, an important call came into the police. A white Mazda Miata, KRISTIN's car, was found in a parking lot near the shopping center where she had shopped. A crime scene investigator arrived and conducted a thorough examination, collecting fingerprints and all available evidence. Inside the car, there was a bottle of water in the back seat. They also found KRISTIN's mobile phone on the front seat, but the real surprise awaited the investigators when they spoke to the parking lot security guard. The man recalled that there had been a small incident involving this car. The car had arrived at the parking lot at 5:45 p.m., but the spot was reserved for another customer. A man had gotten out of the car and, upon being informed about this, reacted aggressively to the guard's warning. He simply threw the car keys at him and left without any explanation. There was no one inside the car. Unfortunately, there were no security cameras in the parking lot, so the driver could not be identified. With no leads, the detectives returned to analyzing the girl's shopping from that day, and they were shocked. On the day of her disappearance, KRISTIN had bought an outfit that was identical to what Susan had described. When Victor had invited her to the casting, he asked Susan to buy a very short black miniskirt, a white shirt, stockings, and shoes. All these items had been paid for using KRISTIN's bank card. The police didn't believe it was a coincidence, which meant she might have fallen into the trap of a scammer whose intentions remained unclear, much like what had happened to Susan, though thankfully her husband was with her. However, there was no information about Victor, and the investigators didn't know how to find him. The police again spoke to the girls who had been living with the missing woman. They recalled that KRISTIN had indeed been planning to go to some casting, but couldn't remember the details. During the conversation, they remembered that it was somehow related to James Bond. They said KRISTIN had been very excited about the event, and the description of the outfit she wore when she left the house, her shirt and miniskirt, matched the officers' concerns exactly. KRISTIN was afraid she would be late for the audition, which was scheduled for 5:30 p.m. She was wearing the very revealing outfit that the perpetrator had asked Susan to wear, and likely KRISTIN as well. The detectives continued to review the camera footage repeatedly in search of Victor, and they finally managed to spot him in the store where the staff had remembered him. However, the quality of the footage was so poor that they couldn't make out his facial features. Still, this was a lead. The investigators, with the help of witness testimonies, were able to reconstruct the suspected appearance of the criminal. By February 26th, a composite sketch of the main suspect in the disappearance of the young beauty had been created. One of the experienced detectives who had reviewed the case materials recognized the man as Victor Poliologus, who had been recently released on parole on January 20th, 2003. He had previously been convicted of sex-related crimes. His troubled criminal past included an incident in which he had lured a woman named KRISTIN Kludyan to his apartment in the same manner. He invited her to a party where many celebrities were supposed to attend. When she arrived, it was quiet and empty. He began to harass her, and when she resisted, he attacked her. The criminal used a rope to strangle her and then attempted to tie her up to rape her. However, the victim gathered her strength, broke free, ran out of the apartment, and was able to seek help from neighbors. Victor Poliologus had used a similar bait to lure his victims, promising casting calls and participation in parties. This was his standard method, and it worked flawlessly in places close to Hollywood. Many young women arrived in Los Angeles chasing the Hollywood dream, and perpetrators took advantage of this. The first time the criminal was convicted for assaulting a woman, he received a suspended sentence. Then came an attempted rape of Katie DeBuona in 1998, where he introduced himself as Brian, a film producer. For this assault, he received a very light sentence. There was also reason to believe he had been involved in embezzling funds at a company where he had previously worked. Moreover, there were numerous other victims, women whom he had attempted to rape. However, all the reports to the police were dismissed because the victims had no evidence. Once, he attacked an ex-girlfriend when he broke into her home. It was another failed sexual assault, but the criminal stole money and jewelry from the apartment. However, this crime also went unpunished, and he received only a suspended sentence. Later, there was a more serious episode. He lured a woman named Heather into a trap. As with the others, he persuaded her to dress in a way that seemed to excite him the most. He then attempted to tie her up and rape her. The girl managed to break free. Miraculously, she pushed the criminal away with a sharp shoe heel. This gave her just enough time to escape and reach her car. She reported him to the police. For this crime, Victor received 2 years in prison. However, on January 20th, 2003, he was released on parole, just 3 weeks before KRISTIN's disappearance. It turned out that, barely released, the criminal returned to his old ways. By the time the police began hunting for him, he was already under arrest. This time, he had stolen a BMW X5 from Beverly Hills and attempted to sell it with fake documents. After his arrest for car theft, police found a wallet with numerous stolen IDs, credit cards, and other documents. Victor Poliologus fit the profile of the criminal in KRISTIN's disappearance case and was operating according to the same method. Everything matched. Therefore, the police decided to show Susan his photo, as she had managed to avoid his attacks thanks to her husband. At the police station, the girl immediately selected his photo from a lineup, and during the identification process, she also pointed him out, saying she recognized him right away, even though it was clear he had tried to change his appearance. The man had slightly hunched his back, stretched one arm longer than the other, and styled his hair differently, but the deception was uncovered. In a separate verification, Susan's husband, who had tried to detain the criminal, also recognized him. Unfortunately, the parking guard, where KRISTIN's car had been found, couldn't identify the criminal as he had only seen him quickly from a distance, in the dark, and hadn't been able to make out his face. Victor was behind bars by that time, but on the day of KRISTIN's disappearance, he was still at large. During the interrogation, the criminal denied any involvement in KRISTIN's disappearance and denied having communicated with Susan, despite all the evidence to the contrary. Victor refused to speak with the detectives without a lawyer. He claimed that he had recently been released on parole and feared being framed. Therefore, the investigators gathered evidence against him. Soon, a new witness came forward. He was a realtor who had been working with Victor for the past few weeks and found his behavior suspicious. The suspect had been looking for a house worth up to $700,000 through him. They visited several properties daily. This continued until news broke of missing documents and keys from one of the houses. However, at that time, the realtor never considered that his client could be the thief. Now, after seeing Victor's photograph in the police report, everything clicked. The witness also identified the criminal. According to him, the last time they met was just a day before KRISTIN disappeared. On that day, Victor had acted strangely. He was unusually nervous. In one of the houses they visited, he went into the bathroom and was shouting from inside, supposedly testing the soundproofing. The police speculated that he might have been testing the acoustics to choose a suitable location for committing crimes. The police searched every house the perpetrator had visited, especially the one that Victor seemed particularly interested in. As it turned out, the house was located in the area where KRISTIN's phone had last pinged, which was also suspicious. The police were searching for any traces, any evidence that could point to KRISTIN. They thought her body might be in the house, but found nothing. Meanwhile, searches were also underway in his apartment. On Victor's computer, photos of women in his favorite outfit were found. It was the same mini skirt, white shirt, stockings, and high heels. By this point, the investigation had been ongoing for 12 days, but the missing woman's family still hoped for her safe return. Meanwhile, Victor continued to deny everything and was reluctant to share any information with the detectives. He only confirmed that he had seen KRISTIN, but then she left and he never saw her again. Victor Poliologus was born in 1962 in Pennsylvania. He came from an ordinary family. He was the youngest of 5 brothers, went to college, and earned a bachelor's degree before moving to Los Angeles to attend graduate school. He was married from 1990 to 1993. Interestingly, there are grounds to believe that the criminal attempted to poison his wife in 1991 when she reported him to the authorities. His attempts to start a restaurant business failed. An image of a man bitter at the world who turned to crime began to emerge. His fetish for beautiful women likely pushed him to cross a dangerous line, and he started attacking them with the intent to rape. Regarding the evening when KRISTIN went missing, the criminal, along with his lawyer, provided an alibi. Victor had been dining at a restaurant with a friend. This information was indeed confirmed, but the police knew that despite this, he had enough time to stage another drama with a new victim and abduct her. On March the 1st, the police received a call from a new witness. The man claimed that on February 15th, he saw the missing woman. She allegedly stopped by his house and was looking for a mansion resembling a castle. The man didn't know where it was, but his wife overheard the conversation and gave her directions. This happened around 5:30 p.m. It became clear that the call had been made to the number 411. The young woman had been trying to find her way to a house that resembled a castle and had called directory assistance. The police now had a new lead, the house resembling a castle. It was the same type of house where Victor had tested the soundproofing. Everything pointed to him. While investigators worked on this information, a new event occurred. On March 3, 2003, 4 teenagers were walking through the Hollywood Hills. They were enjoying the beautiful view of Los Angeles from above when one of them approached the edge and saw a strange object about 100 meters below. The teens started squinting, and it seemed to them that it looked like a mannequin. They started descending, but couldn't get close enough. However, they got close enough to realize that it wasn't a mannequin. It was a human body. The young witnesses were unsure what to do since they hadn't brought their mobile phones. They decided to go to the police, and on the way, met a woman walking her dogs. The teens told her about the horrific discovery. She was able to get closer to confirm it was true. The victim's legs were bound and wrapped in blue fabric. She was wearing a gray hoodie with a hood. Her hands were tied behind her back, and a hair tie was left on her right wrist. Below the waist, her stockings were torn. The woman was terrified by what she saw and called the police. Soon, officers and rescuers arrived at the scene and struggled to retrieve the body from the Hollywood Hills. The perpetrator likely hoped the body would never be found, but it might have remained hidden forever if not for the curious teens who accidentally wandered into such a remote area. The coroner was able to identify the body as KRISTIN Johnson, the missing woman. The victim was found near the house that Victor had shown particular interest in during the real estate viewing. The police notified KRISTIN's parents about the tragedy, and they were devastated by the loss. The victim's body showed numerous bruises and scratches, indicating her desperate resistance. The condition of the body was poor. It had decomposed significantly after being exposed to the heat for many days, with one day of rain. The face was especially unrecognizable due to the numerous injuries and because the head was tilted downward. The victim's ear had been torn off, and there was a large bruise on her head and neck. These injuries were consistent with skull trauma and strangulation, which was deemed the cause of death. But later, more horrific details emerged. The detectives were sure that Victor Poliologus was behind the murder, but they needed to prove that he didn't have an alibi for the time of death. To do this, the police went to his friend Joey, with whom he allegedly had dinner that evening. However, it turned out that Joey wasn't really a friend, but an acquaintance. Upon further questioning, it was revealed that they were supposed to meet much later than the time of KRISTIN's meeting. According to the acquaintance, they had met Victor by chance the day before. On February 15th, he was late for the meeting, arriving around midnight, although they had planned to meet much earlier. Victor had scratches on his face, which he explained were due to an accident while moving. The police were able to reconstruct the sequence of events leading up to KRISTIN Johnson's disappearance. According to the investigation, Victor had chosen his victim at a shopping mall where he often prowled. The man saw the beautiful young woman and decided to act. As usual, he introduced himself as a movie industry worker and invited her to audition for the role of James Bond's girlfriend. He was very convincing. Following his usual approach, Victor showered her with compliments and explained that she was perfect for the role. Considering the young woman's ambitions and beauty, She believed the perpetrator and couldn't refuse. The criminal arranged a meeting in one of the houses he had visited with a realtor, explaining that there was an audition taking place. KRISTIN, unaware that she had walked into a trap, prepared for the audition by dressing in the clothes the perpetrator had requested and arrived slightly late because she got lost on the way and contacted the helpline. This is how she ended up in a deadly trap from which she would never escape. At the meeting, she became the target of harassment. However, she fought back desperately, scratching his face. She had nowhere to run, and the man was still stronger. Therefore, Victor overpowered her, raped her, and killed her to ensure she wouldn't report him. First, he struck her on the head and strangled her, then dumped her body in the Hollywood Hills. The most horrifying part was that the blunt force trauma and strangulation didn't cause her immediate death. She only lost consciousness, and the criminal believed she was dead. When the murderer dropped her onto the rocks, she fell from a considerable height and sustained more injuries. That's when she regained consciousness. KRISTIN slowly and painfully died in that spot, never receiving help, and only after some time did the victim pass away. On May 12, 2003, the district attorney charged Victor with kidnapping, rape, and first-degree murder. However, the defense was fully prepared to fight for their client's freedom, as there was no direct evidence against him. The prosecution had a difficult battle ahead, so forensic experts used all the strongest arguments. The defense contested the time of death, citing insects found on the body. However, all the similarities with previous victims and attacks committed by the criminal were brought up. These cases were so similar that they had to be presented in court. The preparation for the trial took a long time, and Victor Paleologos only stood trial in July 2006. The defense emphasized that the prosecution had almost no physical evidence, no DNA, fingerprints, or surveillance footage linking Victor to the victim. This was explained by the fact that the body was found 2 weeks after the disappearance, and by that time, it had decomposed significantly, destroying all the evidence. However, when all the witnesses who accused Victor of harassment testified in court, the balance tipped in favor of the prosecution. They all described how manipulative the man was. He was so convincing that even the most skeptical, like KRISTIN and Susan, initially believed him and agreed to participate in the audition, unaware of what awaited them. It seemed there was no doubt that this was his modus operandi, and that the defendant had killed KRISTIN, so the criminal used his trump card. To avoid the death penalty, he decided to strike a deal with the prosecution and admit to a lesser crime. Now, the decision to accept this deal rested with the victim's family. By that time, the trial had already lasted 3 weeks with little progress, and its outcome was uncertain. After everything they had gone through, the victim's family was willing to make concessions to ensure he was held accountable. However, on the day of the verdict, the defendant wrote an 11-page motion to the judge asking to withdraw his admission of guilt. Fortunately for everyone, it was no longer possible to cancel it. Victor Paleologos was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. If you liked my work, please subscribe to the channel, support this video with a like, and let's discuss this story in the comments. Take care of yourselves. Until next time.